If you've seen my gameplay of Red Dead Redemption 2, then you immediately know that my relationship with this game is less than healthy. I constantly criticize and dump on it, and yet I keep coming back for more. The fact of the matter is that there's a lot about this game that I hate, but there's an equal amount of things that I love about it. I didn't play this live in front of you no less than 3 times for no reason. So before you throw that lasso and drag me to death behind your pre-order bonus horse, you can rest assured that I gave this game every chance in the world. Let's start with the positive points. This game is gorgeous. Everything comes at you with eye-popping clarity. The level of painstaking detail is evident everywhere you go, and no part of the world feels copy-pasted in spite of it all bearing the same Wild West theme. I mean, I was just watching Couchman yesterday. Was it yesterday or the day before?
It was last night, yeah.
In a sequence where he's catching a theater show, and they're doing all kinds of little dances and stuff, and I was like, oh my God.
They physically do the can.
Yeah. It's like, you've got to be kidding me with all this freaking depth. It's like, there's way more detail than you ever had to do. But speaking of themes, the customization variety is above and beyond what I really need to actually enjoy this game. But thanks to Rockstar's desire to pump as much content in as possible, there's plenty of ways to customize how much of a vinegar-injected popinjay I want to be when parading through a town of NPCs. As someone who loves character customization, this is a huge plus in my book. Gunplay is fun, if flawed, but we can get into that later. Thankfully, there are ways to customize the sensitivity of Arthur's aiming. I, for example, like to have a little resistance behind my aim, so I'm not jerking to and fro like a bird on cocaine. The ability to go into first person is also a nice touch, even if it's one that I could take or leave. The overbearing linearity of the story aside, I really have to give props to the creative team for the characters. From singing songs around the campfire to just normal interactions, the game boasts a cast of likable, if not lovable, characters. My favorite part by far is the sequence where you get drunk with Lenny. A more accurate drunk simulator I have yet to witness. As someone who has literally lived this exact scenario, I can attest to its authenticity. Don't drink, kids. Lastly, I've mentioned the visual aesthetics once already, but it cannot be overstated that trekking through this wild landscape is a real treat. Much like Breath of the Wild, a lot of enjoyment can be drawn from this game just by taking a pleasant stroll through the countryside. As someone who lives on the moon, this is a very nice reminder of the world I left behind. Take a moment to breathe that in and savor it for a little while. Good, right? Well, I hope you enjoyed it, because now comes the dirty underside of this review. To start with, the opening. Much like Skyrim, another game that was justifiably criticized for its on-rails prologue, Red Dead Redemption 2 wastes no time in putting you in a long, drawn-out, story-based tutorial. I would honestly rather sit open-mouthed under my horse that poops more times than I feed it than play that opening bit again. And make no mistake, this is exactly the kind of game I would happily tear through multiple times, if not for the flaws I'm about to go into. Much like Skyrim, it's advisable for someone who doesn't want to run through the opening narrative to create a save file where you've already gone through it. But I would argue that puts an unnecessary burden on the player who already spent their hard-earned money on your game. Next, we have controls. I'm not saying that controls are bad, but when you inconsistently have the aim command wired to the same button as your fire command, it can be problematic. There were times when all I wanted to do was aim my gun, but instead I ended up firing at an innocent bystander. Why is it that I have to push the fire button to draw my gun when it would be much more efficient to use the aim button instead? And that's just one half of the proverbial coin when it comes to the poor overworked fire button. During standoff moments, I'm being prompted to lightly depress the fire button to build up deadeye time, then release it and push that same button again to fire. This often results in a counterproductive instance in which the gauge I just painstakingly filled is reset. And if that wasn't enough, if I don't do it just right, the time runs out and I get shot anyway. Am I really the only one who thinks it makes more sense to hold down the oft underused aim button, then tap fire when I'm ready? Or would that be too easy? Don't bother answering, because I already looked into it, and yes, others have expressed this concern as well. Let me tell you something. If you're worried about the difficulty curve being too low, we might as well dispense with the cowboy equivalent of training wheels known as Deadeye. I don't want to use Deadeye. I'd rather rely on my own reflexes. Is this not supposed to be a gunslinger simulation? Then let me sling guns. If I fail enough times, then I'll use your Deadeye mechanic, but let me at least try, damn it. Now I'll address the story. But bear in mind this is entirely based on my opinion, and is not to be construed as me telling you not to buy this game. First of all, I hate Arthur Morgan. He's a total D-bag. I don't care how many times he goes fishing with the Marston kid, he's scum, and I feel no inclination to root for him, other than I'm the guy who's playing as him. This game suffers under the same issue that Fallout 4 did, only in a bizarro sense. Whereas in this game, you play as a chundering bag of anuses, in Fallout 4 you play as Wasteland Jesus. Maybe I was just too hopeful when I thought this was going to be a game that allowed me to follow my own moral compass. This game sort of lets me follow my moral compass, but every tentpole story quest requires me to shoot at guys who are more or less just doing their jobs and enforcing the law. Maybe I'd be more willing to play along and be the bad guy if it didn't reinforce the illusion of moral choice. For example, it offers a karmometer that fluctuates between good and evil. Despite that, though, you're not actually choosing good or bad. You're just choosing how intensely awful you want to be. Do you want to be the guy who murders and robs, or the guy who murders and robs more frequently? Maybe this is a stupid question, Rockstar, but why make your poor staff burn years of their life away making this world look and act like an organic world where your choices have impact, when in reality they don't? All it really amounts to is whether or not you'll get a discount at the store. Now, I know this is a prequel of sorts of Red Dead Redemption, although it makes zero sense given that it's labeled with a big number 2 on the box. Can I pose a creative thought here and suggest that maybe it shouldn't be a prequel? Why not just set the whole thing in a post-Marston world, or just ignore the canon entirely? I know I'm not alone when I say that we were so slavering at the jowls to dive into a Wild West sandbox that we wouldn't have cared that much whether or not it tied in with the other games. Instead of forcing people to go through a linear narrative about dillhole bandits, you could allow the character to create their own narrative through their actions in the game. Which doesn't mean you can't have a story. I'm just saying that it shouldn't shove the player into the back seat while it takes over driving for a while. And I think that's part of the reason why I harbor such conflicted resentment for this game. It's trying to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to give you an open world experience where you have carte blanche to do whatever the hell you want, good, bad, or indifferent, but it also wants to tuck you in and force you to sit there while it tells you a story. Make up your mind. If you want to be linear, be linear. If you want to be a sandbox, give me my shovel and pail and leave me the hell alone. Well, I'm pretty close to the end of this little rant, but before I render final judgment, I would like to take some time to address some other more minor flaws I encountered, namely hunting. It seems like no matter which game I play that incorporates hunting, the developers can only decide on one of two options. Either animals that you can shred through like tissue paper, or bullet sponges that need more than one headshot to die. This game kind of seems like a combination of both. More often than not, though, I'm led on a merry chase shooting round after round into the beast, even though I clearly scored a headshot as my opening gambit. I've even gone as far as to use the Deadeye system, which I'm not a fan of, and it still wasn't enough sometimes. To make matters worse, I strapped the deer on the back of my horse, haul ass back to camp, only to have the game alert me that the deer has rotted. I watched in despair as my hard-earned kill dropped out of existence from my horse. A Twinkie in a fat camp would disappear slower than the rate at which this deer rotted. I had the deer for at most 10 minutes before it was Thanos'd out of existence because the game thought it was rotten. To be fair, though, this really only happened to me once. I haven't had this problem any other time, so maybe, just maybe, it was a fluke. I'm done bashing this game. The fact of the matter is, I've played so much worse. Fallout New Vegas, for example. I hated that game, warts and all, but I still sank precious months of my free time into it. That's time I'll never get back. At least Red Dead Redemption 2 is mostly fun and gives me something pretty to look at. So in a final word, on a scale of 1 to fantastic, I give Red Dead Redemption 2 a 6, which, based on my crazy rating scale, is a really good sandwich made with artisan bread, aged smoky Gouda, moist cuts of turkey, and crispy strips of bacon that have been baked until every last molecule is crispy deliciousness. Unfortunately, someone decided to put anchovies on it and drench it in ketchup as well. I like that you laughed at Wasteland Jesus and not Chundering Bag of Anuses.
No, because that just sounds like a really awesome like garage band name.
Chundering Anuses.
Wasteland Jesus.
Wasteland Jesus.
It sounds like a song title, actually. Yeah. Continue.
Thank you.